Welcome to the Visser podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Visser. I'm a former Minister of Health and Sports with a PhD in medical sciences. I'm a published researcher, and a long time ago, I started my career as a doctor of chiropractic. Together, I want to explore wellness. I want to explore longevity to get you to the best health you've ever known. So join me on this podcast. Welcome to the Visser podcast. This is a continued interview with Dr. Glenn Thode, Professor of Criminal Law at the University of Groningen, the Netherlands. He was a former governor of Bonaire and also former rector of the University of Aruba. Through his journey, I had him, he's a tribesman, of course, he's one of my tribe. I had him go through a journey of the Ikigai. As you know, he went from, in his younger years, wanting to study medicine to deciding that that wasn't for him, back to instructor of windsurfing on the islands, and then, went back a couple of years later and started his career in law. Complete different kind of directions, but still at the core lay his Ikigai, which I say can change, can move. And as we're finding it, as we're getting closer, as we're trying stuff, as we're working towards our Ikigai, we find different paths. So this is a discussion with Glenn, continued discussion on how we came to his Ikigai. Enjoy. Glenn, you can basically take it away.
Yeah,
Tell me what your background.
It's criminal law and particularly procedures in criminal cases. So it's how, what the lawyer has to do, what the police can do, what the prosecutors do. So it's everything that has to do with procedures and evidence and, until you get either an acquittal or a conviction, all of that. And that's my specialty in law.
Yeah, so you're teaching that at what level? Master's, PhD level?
Yeah, all of those levels, actually.
Okay. So future judges? You're teaching future judges?
Future judges, prosecutors, and lawyers. Yeah.
You were also a former governor of the island of Bonaire.
Yes, I was.
And so what were your duties? What was your kind of unique, I know you were the communicating party between the Netherlands and the island of Bonaire. And also, tell me just in short.
Yeah, in short, you could say I had one of the most beautiful positions that you could probably hold in public office, in my view, of course. And that is because that position exists. Maybe it's a good thing to explain shortly. Bonaire is part of the Netherlands now, used to be part of the Netherlands Antilles. And these are all parts of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So the Netherlands is actually, as a state, it's a kingdom. So you have a royal head of state, it's a king. And then we also it's a democratic monarchy. So we also have elections and you have then a prime minister. And then you have that the organization of governance within the Netherlands, it's also, you have a distinction between central government and local government, like you have between the United States, the president is federal, and you have the states. Here you have the same kind of things, but then you have different states within the state of the kingdom, which was the Netherlands Antilles and the Netherlands, and then it broke off. Aruba became another country. The Netherlands Antilles was a country. And when I started as a governor, I was governor still within the Netherlands Antilles, and the duty was actually to govern this island of Bonaire, to help govern it with other government bodies within the framework of the Netherlands Antilles. So it was one country. And then at the time I was governor, we were also changing the constitution of the kingdom charter. And so we abolished, or you could say, the country of the Netherlands Antilles. And then this Netherlands Antilles fell apart in different islands. some of them became countries, and 3 of them became kind of like public entities, you could call them, but you could also maybe compare it to something like a province or a county or a municipality. So they became part of the Netherlands. So I
Yes.
had to guide this process of change and to see how to best do that. And my way of explaining this at times is, you compare it to a journey through an airplane, with an airplane in which you depart at a certain port. And while you're flying, you have to change the type of airplane that you're flying, and then you land in a different country, and the airplane needs to comply with all kinds of certification norms of that country. So you leave one country with different certification norms, and you have to land in another country, and your airplane needs to be different. So that's how I compared it, and this is the process that I had to do, and that was kind of one of my duties. The other duties were, as a governor, you're the head of the police, so you have to come together with the public prosecutor and the police chief to define policies in things like compliance with law, legislation, but you are also the president, the chairman of the elected body. So, the representation of the community, and you're also the chair of the executive body. And then also as a governor, you have your own authorities as a single governance entity. And in that case, you can even represent the king under certain situations. So that's more or less what it was. It was
Yes. So in that, you did a
beautiful.
lot of travels. You met a lot of heads of state. You had a lot of
Yeah.
duties in that sense. And just to put it in perspective, for those who don't know, the Antilles, or the islands, Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao, Saint Martin, Saint Eustatia, Saba, are located in the Caribbean. So with Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao being off the coast of Venezuela, South America, and then the rest of the islands more in the Caribbean chain with Saint Martin. Saint Martin is split by one part Dutch, one part French. So very confusing for the people on the island. But it's thriving. These are thriving islands in the Caribbean. So and these islands, if you look at the Caribbean, you look at Latin America, it's all colonial states. These were all colonialized, and now are looking for their own footing by the French, the Spanish, the Dutch, the British, Portuguese. Did I forget anyone? This was the new country.
The United States later on.
The United States, exactly, with Puerto Rico. So yes, it's considered the new countries. So it's very interesting, and the great thing about the experience is that you get to deal, because you're an island, you get to deal with diverse languages. So on the islands, everyone speaks 4 languages. Papiamento is the local language. Dutch is the official language. They have English and you have Spanish. Minimum 4 languages, everyone. Because we're very touristic, we're very small, and we need to be able to adapt. We need to be able to survive. And this is the survival mechanism.
Don't forget body language.
Yes. They're big there, especially after, the sunset, where we do the happy hour. But anyway, coming back to the Ikigai. Now, the reason I have Glenn on there, we're tribesmen of the same tribe, just to start that off. And we've known each other since we were kids. We've known each other through the bad, the good, and the ugly. And we have a group of friends that kind of went up, and we all had to leave the island, because when you go to university, you either go to the United States, you go to Latin America, or you go to Europe to study. And there you kind of, set forth your career, and then you end up, some of us end up coming back, some of us end up in Istanbul, Turkey. So it creates an amazing upbringing with, at one side, living in a very small community on the water with white beach sands and turquoise water and fish and everything natural. And on the other side, this thing where you have to leave the island to kind of gain knowledge and see the world. And so it forces you. It's not, you don't have the option of living in a big country and saying, you know, I'm going to study here, I'm going to stay here. I'm just going to go on vacation to somewhere else, but I'm not going to live somewhere else. And that's, you know, stuff that happen that you see a lot in the US, the big countries, Europe, you see this even Turkey, I see this. We are forced to go and expand. We are forced to get out of the box just because that's what it is. And you know, it again, it comes part of this perceived, you know, stress or perceived, you know, where we talk about in the center of the Ikigai, coming back to the Ikigai. And it makes us grow. It's something we need. We need it, you know, I talked about it. We need it in our food, we need it in training, we need everything because this is our genetic makeup. And this is one part where you get pushed to kind of expand who you are, expand your brains, expand your experience, expand your knowledge of culture, you know, food, art, everything, education. So it's an interesting journey we've had. So I want to talk to you. I want to deep dive a little bit in looking at your Ikigai because I remember when we started this process, I started with you and I said, you know, get me your Ikigai. So you went online as you do always. He's a computer nerd, this guy. So he goes and he finds this, you know, program, gets in there, puts all his parameters in there, and then he sends it to me, and you know, it comes out his Ikigai is a naturopath, and he is horny for power. Yeah, translate because it was in Dutch, so we have to translate. You know, geil, boter geil. So that means horny. He's horny for power. I'm like, dude, I was like, the whole naturopath doesn't make sense. See, I left out the horny for power part. Anyway, so it's just a joke. It's just a joke. But it just he just I don't know what he filled in or how the algorithm worked and it forced him. It was off, of course, off base. So we have to. One of the things we have to do when we do these programs or when we don't do it ourselves, and we're going to talk about it, is really have other people look at it that know us, people from our family, people, friends, close friends that know us and have, you know, a different view of us than that we have. And they can give you some kind of check and balance on it. And it's still not the reality because, you know, we have three realities, right? It's the way I see life. It's the way the outsider sees me in life, which is another reality. And then there's the actual reality. Those three a lot of times don't, you know, equate. So we have to look at seeing. And so, but he did it again. And I think he kind of figured out to do the Ikigai. And again, the Ikigai changes. The Ikigai is part of the longevity nine. The longevity nine is where you get to balance your life. So there's nine areas. Ikigai is just one area, and it's called purpose, finding your purpose. It is very important. It is a key aspect of the blue zones where people live to 100 or above 100. They all, at their age of 103, 105, 110, they have their Ikigai. They have their plan de vida. They have their, you know, purpose. And the purpose, a lot of times in, you know, in our cultures, this part is totally simplified to a place where it doesn't make sense and it's a trap. And that is when you see all these superstars and movie stars and recording artists and, you know, athletes and all these guys, they come up and say, you know, just do what you love and you never work a day in your life. Or find what you love and just no, there's more components to it. If it was just that, it'd be easy. But there's more components to it. It's one of the components, what you love. What the world needs is another component. And what you can be paid for is yet again another component. And then there's what you're good at. So really, these four components intertwine to find you the Ikigai. And you need the four components. That's why I like the Ikigai, because these four components really, bring you to a realistic Ikigai. It's not just what you dream about in your fantasy. Listen, when I was young, I wanted to be an Olympic gold medalist, swimming. I was too short. I was this. Then I wanted to be it in running. Then I had all these dreams to go into the Olympics. Guess what? I ended up going to the Olympics 3 times, but as a doctor. So I still went to the Olympics, but I found a different road. And this is part of what Ikigai does. So it helps you find that thing. So you have to have this part of what you're good at. Okay. I'm a great swimmer. I'm a great runner. I mean, I'm athletic as, all. I do different sports, but I'm not Olympic level in swimming. Absolutely not. I'm not Olympic level in running. So, yes, right? So these are the things that we go. And so life pushes us through these areas, and we need to be able to read that. We need to be able to read that very well. So I'm going to stop talking. We're going to go through Glenn's journey to really look at what he discovered and where he came from. Because listen, when he first went to Europe, I remember when he first went to Holland to study, he studied medicine. Then I guess you quit. You came back to the islands. You gave surfing lessons for 2 years because one of our buddies started a surf shop. Our good, he's in our crew. He's in our
Right.
group.
Yeah.
And so Glenn went back and said, "Listen, I'll start. I'll help you set up the surf shop, do surfing lessons." Then after 2 years, he decided I'm going to go back and started a completely new journey in education. So his Ikigai was very, in and out. So tell me a little bit about your experience.
Yeah. Thanks, Rich. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, you mentioned Roger, a buddy of ours, a tribesman, you could say.
Yep.
And I came to study medicine in the Netherlands. He came also to study here. I think he wanted to become an electrical engineer or something like that, or some engineer.
Totally
And
not
some
his
technical,
Ikigai.
yeah, some technical study. But what wasn't in his Ikigai either, I remember, was dealing with the weather here. He couldn't cope with the cold and the wet and the darkness of winter.
The
At least
rain.
not, yeah, the rain all the time. He didn't like it, and he followed his heart. He decided he would go back and started doing some jobs in windsurfing. So actually, the interesting thing was I was kind of having a hard time when I came here and studied medicine. I loved medicine. I loved the science of it. I liked the study a lot. I liked to discover how at that time the you could almost say the art and the science of medicine, at what stage it was of know-how, of awareness. I love
Mm.
that, and I love the discovery part. But there was another part to it that I discovered I did not like, which I didn't know at first. And that was the part in which doctors somehow, or people studying medicine somehow, it changes their ego and arrogance, kind of the way they handle that. And that started happening actually while I was studying to friends of mine. So
Yeah.
I was actually asking myself if I wanted to be part of this profession, if I wanted these guys to be my colleagues in the future. That was really a struggle for me. That was one part, and the other part was
I
interestingly
mean, I see it.
because
Just to cut, I
uh-huh,
see that everywhere, but I see it in certain places like Europe or the Netherlands. I see it more. It's
yeah.
stronger there, and then you have other places where it's kind of less. It's a little bit the
So
God complex.
yes, so to me, you could say it's part of my ikigai. What matters to me is I cannot find happiness. I cannot be proud of being like that. So I couldn't. I noticed little by little that would not be my tribe. So I decided to, I was kind of like doubting if I should continue. And there was another thing happening to me at that time. Of course, as you mentioned, we grew up on this beautiful island of Aruba. You grow up there, going to the schools that we went, and you grow up in your culture. And all of a sudden, when we are at the late teens, we need to depart from our culture and our island and our families, and we go and study abroad. That happens to a lot of the kids from these islands, so to us also. And when I was away, this process started in my mind of kind of like readjusting, finding my kind of like a true nature type of thing, something in myself, in which I started to reflect back on the lessons I learned through my parents. Like my dad wanted to show me how to become a man, and I kind of felt like this manhood, the behavior, the values, the way in which we interact with other men and interact with women, and with things like property, what do we value? Do we value sports cars or something else? Stuff like that. My dad was teaching me this. And when I was here, I started to reevaluate those teachings. And I thought to myself, well, which one do I agree with and which ones don't I agree with? And that was a process that started in my mind on its own, which I almost couldn't stop. I mean, it really consumed my mind, and it got a little bit in the way with my studies, So I was like, what should I do? And then, interestingly, our friend Roger called me and he said, I'm setting up this business. You have to help me out. So I decided I quit my medicine studies and I would go to Aruba and I would go help him out. And so that part of the journey really, again, kind of like pulled me out of a situation. And I noticed that actually I was quite happy working with him, helping him to set up the business, teaching windsurfing. We weren't only teaching, we were designing, the lessons ourselves, the methods and methodologies. And interestingly, while before that I was a student and we went to school, in my mind, I always thought that you must be crazy. There must be something wrong in you to want to become a teacher, because
I had those same thoughts.
Yeah, I wasn't. How can you say this? I wasn't the best student. And in classes, I would disrupt the lessons. Me and some of my buddies, and we would always clash with the teachers. I would be sent out of the class to stand under a palm tree or whatever. And so to me, you must have been crazy to become a teacher. But teaching windsurfing actually showed me the other side of it. And I noticed that I can windsurf well. Somebody walks up to the shop who cannot windsurf yet. And because of the method we designed and the lessons we designed, and Roger even designed like a simulating type of thing that you could teach them. You remember that you could dry teach them first, and then you would go underwater. You would teach them the fundamentals
and then later
of how
you can
to
barbecue
steer the board. Yeah, you could. Indeed.
Roger's design, multiple design.
Roger's design, man. He always thinks about things that you can use multiple ways. And so, interestingly, I discovered the how can I say this? The beauty of teaching, in which you actually you share something, a capability you have with others. And that's when I started to really love teaching. And then, of course, I went and studied law. And then while I was studying law, some of my professors, they asked me if I wanted to assist them in doing research. And at first I'm like, assist you, what is it? Kind of like a job, So they offered me a job, becoming an assistant, but I already had a job. I was working with Roger. I was going to the shop in the morning and studying in the afternoon at the university. And as they asked me to do this, I would have had to reduce the amount of days I was working with Roger to start working at the university. And we talked about it and it was okay. So I started doing research work, which I then also discovered that I like, and especially in the beginning, what I did was I matched the research part with things that I'm passionate about. I feel very connected to nature. So I started to study and to research how the nature is protected in Aruba. So I did that for a while. Then we published even a first book about nature protection law in Aruba and so on. Me and I had convinced two other students to actually do a research with me, so we could expand on the research. Do the amount of it was a lot of work because it was new. Nobody had published about this subject in that way yet before. So in
Yeah.
these type of how can I say this experiences actually they guided me to find my ikigai. It was most of the time, and that's why I liked it that you said, you have these three levels of awareness that you have to go to. You see yourself, others see you, but then there's another reality out there. I noticed a lot of times that the way I view myself not necessarily matches how others see me. And a lot of times
Exactly.
other people saw potentialities or capabilities in me that I didn't know I had. I didn't know I could do scientific or academic research. I didn't have
Hmm.
an intrinsic drive to do it. I didn't have an ambition to do it. But teachers that saw me doing the legal work and the way I think I may have responded to them, they saw it and they actually activated me to start doing research with them. And then I was hired at the university to even design classes for judges and lawyers and prosecutors. And that's how actually a professor approached me and said, we're opening a PhD spot. I think you should apply. I had no clue what a PhD was at the time. Again, it wasn't in my view as a
Yeah, yeah,
career
yeah.
path or an ambition you could have. It wasn't at all in my awareness. So I asked him what it was, and then he's like, "You have to, yeah, do this research and so on." And I noticed already by doing these little jobs at the university that I enjoyed doing research. And to my surprise, when I started doing research, actually they said, "Well, part of being an assistant professor is you need to teach." I was like,
All
whoa,
right.
teaching, in front of university students, teach criminal law. To me, that was kind of shocking. But the fact that I had enjoyed teaching windsurfing, and one thing I forgot, I also got into teaching computer classes, which I did for quite some time in Aruba. Those two experiences of teaching things that I loved computers, and I was self-taught
Hmm.
computer technician and I loved teaching windsurfing. When I started to like criminal law, I thought, well, I should be able to teach this also. But of course, it was teaching in Dutch. It was teaching at the university. There's a lot more scrutiny about it. But that's when I found out that, I can do this. I can get paid for doing stuff I like, which was my experience up to that moment, which is a great part of
And
your
you were good
Ikigai.
at it. So you had a
Yeah,
part that you were good at. You
yeah,
found out what you liked, right? So you have
yeah,
already two parts of the Ikigai.
yeah.
And the other part is, it's good for our planet. It's good for our world. It's good for our society. So that part's also there. So you got three parts going.
Yeah, to
And
me, what
now
I noticed, go ahead.
so the one part is, how can I make money at this? Because you need to survive. You need to, be able to
Yeah,
take care of your family. You need to have that stress at a low setting.
yeah, and that's interestingly the question is how do you focus on things like money also? I speak sometimes to young students, and I ask them why do
Mm,
you study law, and they immediately mention to me, I want to become rich. They see themselves already as a successful lawyer, having a lot of money. I want to buy an Audi sports car, something like that, which they do mention that. And then I ask
mm,
them which type and so on, they're like the TT or the R
mm,
models. So that's a lot of time, kind of like what they focus on as also a purpose why they study law. And what I liked about studying law myself was that it was an instrument to help to structure society, help to to resolve conflicts. But particularly in my mind, when I started studying law, that's why I wrote a lot about protecting nature, was actually that with the law, you have an instrument to protect interests that usually don't protect themselves. Like people that don't have power, or things like a natural resource, or things like that. So you can actually use law as an instrument to distribute power better, more equally. And I noticed that
Right.
those are things that I focus on, while other people may focus on the making money part. And I do agree,
Yeah,
maybe
I think, but the
that's
making money
uh-huh.
part, the making money part, a lot of us or a lot of people will look at it as, you know, either they really like it and that's a focus, and also in medicine and any profession. I mean, that's why you do it.
Yeah,
You invest. I mean, listen, when you go to school that long, you've invested so much money, you got loans
you
in the bank,
invest a
you need
lot
to
of
make money.
time.
Because if
You
you don't
invest
make
time.
money, you're not going to be good for anyone. You're not going to be able to do any good. You
Yeah,
know,
true.
you're going to be out
It's
in the
like
street. So
it's like the airplane. You
yeah,
need to have oxygen to help others, and it's the
yeah,
same with money.
yeah.
It's like
And
oxygen
that's why
to
it's so
function.
important that circle is so important, but you got to balance it out, you know? And so if you, let's put it this way, someone like you studies criminal law, right? Says, okay, it's good for the society, whatever. And then says, this is my passion and stuff. And then comes to the money part and says, man, I need a lot of money. I want to be like super rich. Well, guess what? You can go the law side, or you can just go the criminal and just cut out the law. You have the knowledge, right? You can manipulate the system. That was a joke, people. That was a joke.
That's
So,
you made me think about this cartoon that I've seen once, where a dad sees his young son, and he asks his no his yeah he asks his son, "What do you think about the future? What would you like to become?" And then he says, "I'm thinking about a career in organized crime." And then the guy says, "Okay, which one, the mob or government?" Yeah.
so let's get it down to this session that I made you do of the Ikigai. Because listen, as we age, our Ikigai changes.
Yeah.
Our priorities change in the world. Things change. Listen, if you just look at profession, which is part of the Ikigai, right? It's where. Give me a second here. It's where you have an intersection of profession is where you have an intersection of what you're good at and what you can get paid for. That intersection of those circles is profession. Now we know that professions have changed. I mean, when we were growing up, you had
Oh yeah.
lawyer, you had the standard silos of professions.
Mhm.
That has blown up. We have seen that, we're crossbreeding professions. We've got super specializations, especially in medicine and stuff. It's off the charts.
It's the same in almost every discipline. I mean, if I drive around now in the Netherlands where I live, I mean, you go to any big city and you'll find, you know, dozens of high schools and universities offering studies that have new names that are hyper specialized. And I'm like, okay, this is a new study. There's another new study. And I think that is probably quite a challenge for the youngsters out there to think, which one of these studies should I do and how does it fit? Because, like you mentioned, we are in a fluid moment in history, I think, in which so many things are changing. We're leaving behind maybe some of these long established professions. We're leaving them behind, and they're
Well, the
changing
silos that
enormously.
they were in,
Yeah,
the silos. So these
yeah,
professions that we knew were in silos. If you study law, you know nothing about medicine, you would never touch medicine. If you
yeah.
study math, now math, law, science, genetics, it's all coming together. It's all working together. Environment is coming in. I mean, it's such, and it's creating brand new areas of specialization, brand new areas that, were foreign to us. We didn't even know that exist in our time. It didn't exist. So
Yeah.
it's challenging for them, but also for us because we're doing our
Yeah.
Ikigai now.
Yeah. And I do think that it's an interesting development because just reflecting, there's this concept, the Renaissance man, in the time of Renaissance, where you also had a lot of change, you had people bringing together all of these older silos, like a person like Da Vinci or so many of these
Right.
enlightened persons in those times. They were studying the cosmos, they were doing chemistry, they were doing physics, they were doing art, music and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've departed from that a little bit in hyper specialization. But there's something of it coming back, which is interesting,
Mm.
I think. And and finding your path, I think the Ikigai, like you mentioned, it's a so I'm actually thankful that that you asked me that question because
Yeah.
it does help you to bring back the focus
Yes.
to these
Yes.
four key areas actually because it simplifies your search or your
Yes.
journey,
Yes.
and it also helps you to actually go back to those four things that they're not I think they're fundamental. Oh,
Yeah. And, in life, I talk about
yeah.
perceived adversity, with all the longevity nine. Uh, We're creating perceived adversity because we need that. Because if you look at our genetic background of 7 million years that we've roamed this earth, it's all been fight or flight. It's all been survival. We are programmed for survival. So now, in these last 50 to 100 years, where everything is readily available, your fridge is full, you can order in anything, you don't have to do anything, you're not running away from a tiger, you're just sitting at home watching the tiger on Netflix, all the information is coming to you. You really don't have to do anything. Our bodies aren't geared for this. So then we go into dis-ease. We rapidly go into disease, and that's what we're seeing. People with morbid obesity, people with diabetes, people with chronic diseases dying earlier, where we have the technology to keep them alive till 120, but they're dying early. The amount of stress we have, and we see it now in our children. I mean, this is a generation that has enjoyed more Ritalin and pharma psychotic drugs than
Yeah.
any generation before it. The issues start with babies having caretakers that are called iPhone, from little. I mean, this massive amount of information coming to our children from all angles. It's making them, you know insecure. It's making them confused about their identity. It's making them confused about who they need to be and what they need to be. They're getting all these images of false
Yeah.
gods, false examples. And it's so much. And at certain ages, they cannot filter that. We can to a certain extent, but they can't. And so I look at our modern, our modern society, and I look at, okay, where can we find this ikigai? It's Japanese, and it's funny. Something that has really come up and become amazingly popular is the anime or manga. And in there, because it's Japanese, they always have the ikigai. Now it's hidden, because there's a lot of like fighting and stuff, but there's always a sense of looking for purpose, finding your past, revenge, no matter what. There's a journey in there. The journey is about the struggle, it is about pain, it is about personal growth, it is about mastering your craft, and it is about doing something for the world, doing something for people in need. So very interesting.
Yeah.
That's why I'm connecting that to the ikigai work. I think it's very interesting, and it's also interesting because so many people are drawn to the anime. So many people are drawn to the anime, different ages. It's not just the young kids; it's people in their 30s, 40s that are looking at anime. My son is, you know, anime freak. He's gotten me into it, and so yeah. it's very interesting how that connects and how maybe it teaches us a way to bring back this Ikigai to our kids, to these generations that are easily lost. And a lot of, you know, they just have it's a much more difficult way to find their Ikigai than we did. We didn't have many options. You know, when you don't have many options, it gets easy. You know, it gets easy to put the focus down. I see it with children in Cuba. I see it with children in these poor countries where they have one way of getting out, either in sports, the arts, or being a medical doctor. And you see them go for it, right? Because there's this pinhole. That's where they need to go. So they find out very quickly what they're good at. They find out very quickly how to survive. And they have real adversity, not perceived adversity that we do. And we have to do for our kids. We have to give our kids perceived adversity. Otherwise, they don't grow, you know? And so you see these kids focus and do unbelievable things with no resources, zero resources. And here we're complaining, oh, we don't have the best baseball mitt, or we don't have the best ball, or we don't, you know, we don't have the best sneakers, or, you know, the music's in my iPods aren't the best, so I can't work out, or whatever. Understand? And so this becomes more difficult. It becomes more difficult in the modern societies to get children to focus. And you know, we could see it with all the drugs being used for focus for children in schools. It's unbelievable. So the Ikigai, the manga, the you know, looking at the anime, for me, it's a way of one, it's popular, so people like it, people, you know, enjoy this type of art, and to in there bring in this idea of Ikigai and teaching you indirectly, and it's a great way of teaching, as you know. The Ikigai I find fascinating.
Yeah. I agree. It's holistic also, actually, because like you mentioned way earlier in this episode, you know, if you go back to art, if you listen to a song like by Bruno Mars and I forgot the other guy, you know, I want to be a millionaire, so freaking
Mm,
bad. And also they're singing about money, so it's one of those things of Ikigai. You mentioned also people going like just find your passion and you'll make it. Also,
mm.
again, one segment, one of those factors.
Component.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of those components. But what I like about this is it's holistic. It's it harmonizes and it synthesizes actually all of these components that are basically also features we have as human beings in our minds, in our spirit, in our drive. We have all of these things. We have these feelings, of course. So we connect to things in which we create a preference or something that we feel really is part of us, and then that becomes what you love. You know, what matters to you is what you value more or less. What you're good at is just, well, your skill sets. You were born with
Mm,
great motoric skills or something. You can
mhm.
make things that other can't. And the interesting thing is, if you can then create something that is valued, of course, you get paid for it.
Yeah.
So, so
I
I
mean, it needs
like
to be
this
in there.
whole, yeah, I like
It needs to,
the
you know,
whole
I mean,
approach of it.
whatever, yeah, whatever relationship you have to money, and we all have different relationships to money, depending from our past, where we come from, and whatever. It's considered as energy. Considered it as an energy exchange, and it needs to be there. If it's not there, trust me, it will not work. I've done it when it's not there, and it doesn't work. With your best intentions, it doesn't work. Volunteer work doesn't work without money. Organizations
True.
that make a difference worldwide don't work without money. You understand? You need it. So you have to look at it as energy that you need to be able to run the rest. So it has to be in that thing. Now, can we focus too much on it? Yes. The focus needs to be balanced, like you said, holistically. But then again, the Ikigai itself can be too intense. There are people where the Ikigai is so intense that when you look at the longevity nine, it's weighing too high. That's all they do is the Ikigai. So they left movement out. They left nutrition out. They left out, time to be together with the tribe, time to create a tribe. They left out time for their loved ones. So they throw the whole longevity nine out of balance. That's not good either. We need to be able to balance within the longevity nine that Ikigai and not let it overpower. It needs to be one of the balancing factors of the bigger circle.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. You may have to see it also that there's a circle outside of those circles. And maybe you could see it this way, that even in a daily life, you may have to travel the whole circle. Sometimes you gotta go and you have to focus on the money part. You gotta get paid for
Readjust
something.
your priorities.
Yeah, and then another time you're gonna go and see, what am I good at? Maybe I'm doing something I'm not good at. Let's refocus. And sometimes it's the other way around, and that can happen through daily life. You're asked to do something. Well, you gotta connect to, am I good in it? Should I do it or should I not do it? And that's so the Ikigai helps you to also kind of like have a reference point for this. What choices do I make? And it helps you to make maybe wiser choices that are more in harmony with you. So that's also a great use of it, I think. And
Yeah, I
so
mean, a real, for business people, I think a real crude way of looking at it is you're doing a SWOT analysis on yourself. It's crude, but just to connect it. But the Ikigai is much more than that. And it's fluid, it changes. And it's something that I believe once you know it, you let it go because you know it. And so, and so you shouldn't have it rigidly. But what the Ikigai does, why do we want an Ikigai done? Why is that so important to have that Ikigai? Because when you have an Ikigai, when you have a purpose, it pulls you through hardship. It pulls you through all the work that you might not like, but that you need to do to build and get to your Ikigai, to your destiny. Because you need to do a lot of hard work. That is life. You want to be successful, you need to do the work. In the end, you need to do the work. And so having an Ikigai, it kind of pulls you from the other side through those challenges, which is much easier than facing each challenge and really not truly knowing why you're doing it. It's like, I'm going to clean this toilet. I hate cleaning toilets and I don't know why I'm doing it. Or I'm going to clean this toilet and I hate cleaning toilets. But my Ikigai tells me if I do this, I'm a step closer to where I need to be to do my next move, to get closer to my goal. So then that chore becomes just a chore you do. And you do it with your focus on where you're going. And it becomes a whole different thing. It's a whole different experience.
Yeah, and it's Zen-like, right? It's also Japanese, of course, because it's just like brushing your teeth, combing your hair, cleaning your home. Those are the things that they need to be there to be a foundation for all the other work. If you don't brush your teeth, you don't have healthy teeth to chew the food that you so desperately need to survive. And you may enjoy even, so if you have a toothache, you can't enjoy the food. So it's interesting to see all this connectedness, and especially if you're into Zen-like practice, the Zen-like practice, what I like about it, and it connects to your Ikigai also, it kind of like brings you back to the core value of doing everything, the purpose of doing everything. So even you can approach even cleaning the floor from an Ikigai perspective, the purpose of it, and it connects to your purpose. You'll do the best job you can.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think the Japanese way of finding your drive and also purposing your actions, right? Yeah, it's amazingly powerful.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so let's get to what you found in Ikigai on the thing. We're beating around
Yeah,
the bush a lot here.
what did you find again with what was it again that I sent you?
The first
Yeah,
one you sent me was a naturopath, which
naturopath.
where did that come from? And you're horny for power.
Yeah, my powerness. Yeah, you know
Yeah.
that then I yeah indeed
I know
the
there's a
that
different saying in English language, but I just love the translation from
yeah
Dutch, so I'm gonna keep
to do
using
it
that
like
one.
yeah. But you know, when I look at these and your reaction to them, it reminds me of one thing, and it goes back to what you said in the beginning. I'm not good at taking tests. I never was, because I have
I'm worse than you.
yeah. One of the things that I notice always, as actually shown in tests that I do, is I'm extremely consistent. And when you're very consistent, you get results in these type of tests that are a bit wacky always. So when I take a test now, if I really am serious about, this test needs to reflect me more or less,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like almost do my best to not be extremely consistent, and also not to be very, very strong in my views, just. And actually, interestingly, because I did, like you mentioned, when I showed the test results to other people and asked them, do you recognize me if you look at the characterization of the test results and you look at our interaction through time, especially people that know
Mm-hmm.
you for years, does it does it does it match? Does it gel with who I am and so on? I've taken sometimes psychological tests in the past, and it would in which they describe, because usually then they extract the test results and they put it in a narrative. So in the
Mm-hmm.
narrative, you'll find, Glenn would be a person who would easily lose his temper, things like that. Then I'll ask people, oh, do you recognize me? No, this isn't you. So it's interesting to do the tests, but it'll also let other people help you to reflect
Check
on
it.
them,
Yeah.
check it,
Yeah.
and so on. So that's a very important, I think, point you touched in the beginning. And
Mm-hmm.
then even then, doing these tests can help you to self-reflect. And I think I've done them. And to me, what comes out in the center, that I'm always looking for balance. That's interesting to me myself. I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
for a way to kind of like, even working in law, the Lady Justice has
Yeah. The
this
scales.
balance, the scales. So I'm always looking in the scale to be balanced. But even so, I would
You're
take
not born in
also.
October, are you?
I'm born in November, so
Well,
I'm
what's your sign?
in the
Yeah,
horoscopic
Western.
signs. I'm a Scorpion.
Oh,
In the
because you're
Chinese,
right
I'm a
after the
snake.
scales.
Yeah, I am after the scales. True.
Yeah, I'm a snake
So
too, an Asian.
yeah, so I'm a snake and a scorpion, so I'm very poisonous, it seems.
No.
And that can actually, I think it does match a particular core part of me, which I find also in these type of things, is that I can go to, if I value something extremely, as extremely valuable or important, then I can really try to protect that value or thing of extreme importance. And I'll do that, even if it means that I could use poison to actually protect it. So that's an interesting,
Yeah.
maybe point of becoming aware for myself. So, and doing the Ikigai, it brings you back to what are your
Yeah.
passions, dreams, the activities that I enjoy now, or even as I was a child. And I noticed that I like to discover things. I'm always looking for insights, trying to gain more awareness. And I was lucky to have been born with a very discerning mind. So I can really look and see little distinctions and see differences very easily.
Yeah.
And I've learned through time to maybe express the things that my mind becomes aware of. I wasn't like that in the beginning, of course. You're a child, you're growing up. But I started doing this already as a small child. I would try to ask my parents and my grandparents, like, okay, what's this? How does it work? But I would also get into debates with them. So I like this process of debating things, and because of the debates, gaining insights, talking about it. So somehow I love discovery. I love to gain insights. I love to understand how things are. So that's one of the important ones. Then when I come to what matters to me, I've started, I was looking through my whole life also when you find a question like this. And to me, I noticed that already as a young child, I would kind of like feel connected to nature. And even when people would cut down trees, I would kind of like feel an energy that they were emanating, smell the smells that was coming out of these plants that were being cut down, and it would sadden me. It would touch me very in my
Really?
core, and it would make me cry. So already I would feel that as an injustice being done to the plant or to vegetation. If it was done, even though I do understand that, and if you can do it in ways that maybe are respectful to the life they represent, but you can
Yeah.
also do it in ways in which it is not respectful, very extremely violent. And so I notice the difference. I can sense the difference, and so that matters to me a lot, it seems. It makes me sad when I see how people treat each other and how people treat everything around them, especially when there's violence involved and disrespect involved. So those are things that really matter to me somehow. And I find it then, because of that, I find it important to do something about it. I can't just stand by and be idle about it and say it's not
Yeah.
important or I don't care. And
A
somehow
criminal law is kind of the extreme case. Like, okay, let me
yeah,
go to
it
the
is.
extreme of these emotions.
Yeah, yeah, true. Because, somebody did something that we think in society is so wrongful that we think, well, if you do this, society needs to punish you for it. And criminal law used to be very extreme. It involved punishments like torture, and it involved even in many countries it still involves that.
Yeah.
And it involves punishments like the death penalty. So it can be it's the legal discipline with the most extreme consequences, you could say,
Right.
because there's
So
no
so
other
listen,
legal.
you told me
Uh-huh.
we were at the big courthouse in Amsterdam, and you told me
Mhm.
because I asked you a question about what is it about law, criminal law, that you, because you come from, like, this whole, kumbaya, live together, nice, be in harmony and stuff, and then you're in criminal law. Like, how does that, how how do you reconcile, how does that go? And then you start explaining to me the philosophy of criminal law, like why is it there and what is its purpose and what, things it will use to kind of prove
Yeah,
its point, which was very
yeah,
interesting to me. I've never heard it that way. I was like, yeah, so go ahead and explain that
yeah.
for
Because
our
criminal
audience.
law in its current form, it's changed through time, just like you mentioned our Ikigai changes through time, but that was also the role of criminal law has also changed through time. And it was actually after the Dark Ages that it really gained the current character it has. And the character of criminal law is actually prevent the willful, use of the power of state or somebody in power to just punish somebody without any good reasons. So criminal law guides the process that each one of us may have. The moment that we see something being done which we think that shouldn't be done, it really moves us. We think that's a crime being committed, and we actually can come in and try to protect the person against whom the crime is being committed to. So you could maybe protect the property of somebody from the thief. And in the past, it was like, okay, we'll cut off your arm, so you won't be able to steal anymore. And it was in the old criminal law, it was an eye for an eye. And an eye for an eye has this very interesting thing. It means that the punishment should match the crime. It's not an eye for an arm or an eye for your two legs. No, it's an eye for an eye. So there are all of these little intricacies in criminal law in which it helps to, this almost innate drive for revenge. It culturalizes that, and it makes it a matter of society against an individual. So, and then criminal law also, at that moment, it modulates the power of society against the individual to make sure that it is not misused. And to me, and that process of what do we make a crime, so there's a lot of behavior happening in society, and you could say, okay, if you do this, you're liable, or we need to make you accountable for this. But when do we make you accountable in such a way that we say, now society is going to punish you for what you've done? So for this, you need to formulate crimes. That's how it works in our system. So you define what type of behavior is actually a crime. But once you define that, it cannot be any just willful act of a prosecutor say, I'm sure you committed it, so now I'm going to take you away and I'll punish you for it. No, there's a whole process of how do we gather the evidence? When are you a suspect? When indeed do you fulfill the conditions for your action to be qualified as that crime that we've defined? And so because of that, you always have the legal right for a good defense. So that, and then you have the judge that eventually needs to look at what the prosecutor presents and their scenario of the evidence. And you have the lawyer that presents the scenario from the perspective of the defendant, saying this person that's being suspected, well, these evidence pieces, if you put it in my scenario, it doesn't constitute proof that he behaved in a way that is, that's covered by that, what we defined as a crime. So all of these things are there. And the beauty of it is it's the most precise discipline of law. And that's what I also like. I discovered that I love precision. And I love precision.
So tell me
part.
about the use, because you told me about the use of isolation and the use of freedom as tools of punishment, and why.
Yeah, indeed. The interesting thing is, of course, through time, in the beginning, when criminal law, let me put it back into millennia, that criminal law is being studied also by academics nowadays, punishment used to be very corporal, because people didn't have property and so on, and people were usually bound in slavery anyway, so they didn't really have freedom. So a lot of times the punishment was corporal because they had their bodies and they had the sound body. So they would punish you by, as they called it in Dutch, duimschroeven, so sometimes they would torture you to punish you. Sometimes they would torture you to get actually you to make a declaration about your actions, and then punish you. And then the worst punishment thinkable would be to actually kill you. You know, so you're in those days your soul needs to leave your body. You could say that was the thinking in those days. But then, as people would become free and would not be slaves, and as people would start to be able to have property and and maybe value their property a lot, that's when there was a shift to think, okay, maybe the worst punishment nowadays is in a way in which we think that killing somebody is a crime in itself. So why have the death penalty? It would be a crime by the state. Instead of doing that, punishing that crime with that same crime, we would find maybe more civilized way of punishing a person. And one of the most precious and valuable, you could say, possessions or something that the person values is their liberty. So actually, because of that, you would take away their liberty as a form of punishment. That's one part of putting somebody in prison. But there's another part of it, which is not always very evident in the public debates, that is protection of society. The moment you take somebody away, especially if that person is a criminal that commits, you could say, a very dangerous crimes. Yeah, heinous crimes like murder, a mass murderer, or a serial murderer, or terrorism, and so on. You put somebody like that in prison, so you extract them from society in which they cannot move about anymore freely and commit crimes. So it's also, that's the preventative part of it. So you have two factors, two sides of the punishment for taking somebody's liberty. One of them is the repressive side. Okay, you like your freedom, we'll take it away from you. That's repression. And there's the prevention. We don't want you to be in society because you'll do these things we don't want you to. So that's one of them. And then nowadays, also, another type of punishment has become the fines. You know, because a lot of times people, like you mentioned before, also in this episode, we said you need money to be able to do things. Even to commit crimes, you need money. So what we'll do when we when we think, and actually committing crimes, you can also earn a lot of money. So when they think you've committed crimes, we'll take away the earnings, and we will take away your capability to commit more crimes when we fine you, when we take away your money. So in Dutch, they even call this plukse-wetgeving. You know, you pull away their feathers; they can't fly anymore.
Right.
So that's
a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the bare bones of why we do.
That's the bare bones of why we do it. And interestingly, in my mind, you know, as I've studied more and more, I've taken this deep dive into criminal law and criminal procedures. I do think, though, that we are overusing criminal law. You know, the courts are also becoming, they're becoming overused, or they're barren, you could say. It's overbearing for them.
Yeah.
They don't have enough criminal judges in the Netherlands, prosecutors and criminal lawyers in criminal cases, almost for the amount of cases they have. Because there's a proliferation crimes and things that have been, all kinds of behavior that have been defined as crimes, and well, they all need to be prosecuted once they're defined. So, and I do believe I've become partly an abolitionist. I think we should abolish a lot of things that we've defined as crimes through times. We should take away most of them. Well, and some of them we should keep because of the safeguarding, because of the heinousness of some actions, and to prevent that people will have to act on a kind of like stance and maybe legitimate sense of revenge. You need to have that society tempers that. It kind of like modulates that into a more civilized reaction towards people who have committed heinous acts. So you can't take it away completely, in my view, but well, we can adapt and change its nature and reduce the amount of behavior that we think are crimes nowadays. So that's also part of my Ikigai, I think. The
Absolutely. This is
balance.
a huge deep dive. This is a super deep dive. We'll have more sessions. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you too for the opportunity.
Again, this is amazing information, and we're going to try to really make a good podcast out of this. So for all you out there, he's my first guest.
I am? Really? Wow. Okay, thanks for that.
You are the first guest. You're the first guest. Trying to find out how this stuff works. All right. Yeah. Take care. I'll call you.
Thank you. Okay. We'll be in touch.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this session. This was part 2, Ikigai, of course, and finding our purpose. And our purpose is number 2 in the Longevity 9. The Longevity 9 is key. This is where we balance our life. This is where we balance our being. Ikigai is number 2. We're going to move on to number 3 of the Longevity 9. Thank you for joining us. I hope this could help. I really think this helps. And write us. You know, give us some comments. Subscribe. Ring the bell notification. This is just going to keep going. And remember what I always say. Stick with me. And you will be the healthiest you've ever been. See you next time.